And that'll be 49.39.
49.39.
And I'm writing it down.
All right. I think we are on. You hit the button, and now I am going to go 49.
Isn't that from a song? Push the button.
Push the button.
What is that from?
I don't know.
Do you know that one? It's like a kind of a, it's like almost electronic, like maybe it's a Beck song, Push the Button.
It sounds like it could, something would be a Beck, that would be a Beck song.
Yeah, it feels Becky.
Becky, Laura, like when I do dishes and go grocery shopping and stuff, Laura calls me Becky Homecky, right?
That's so cute. I always say, I'm not slave Mabel.
All right, I'm trying to get Jill. You said 49.39 on the Jill Stein. Everybody's hearing our background nonsense.
You're getting our pre-show awesomeness.
Right. All right, here we are. Here we are. Are there people in the chat room? I see it says there are 8 people there, but none of them have told us they hear us yet. So until I hear from them that they hear us.
So it's their fault that we're not.
It's their fault, right? It's oy vey. It is oy vey. Oy
What's
vey.
the response been to your awesome new shirt?
So far, if somebody can let us know that they hear, it says there's 14 people in the chat room, but I haven't heard, no one has said hello yet.
S-Bar hears us. Hey, S-Bar.
Yay! Okay, perfect.
Francesca, I love you.
So far, not the like TSA agent who like checks your ID, but like when you're putting your stuff on the thing to go through the thing, like he, when I was putting my bag in the little gray square, he was like, what is that? And so I had to explain to him about Yiddish and Jewish and right and oy vey, and then but the oy vey is always about someone else, not you. So oy vey, right? Yeah. So that's been the only response. But I had a sweatshirt on. Other than that, and I just had my sweatshirt off because I had to take it off to go through the TSA. But like secret squirrel for people right now who generally try not to travel a lot because they don't like all of that. A lot of the TSA lines in Austin right now are metal detectors only. You'll like, they have like things rearranged. There's like a temporary setup because they're doing some updates. And so there's not as many of those awful porno scanners, right? So there's like a lot of metal detectors instead. So if you've been waiting to be able to travel and not have to go through a porno scanner, now's your shot.
Metal detector is not the remedy for me. Metal detector is like why I won't go to anything at Meow Wolf. Metal detector is why I stopped going to the Hollywood Bowl.
I know you didn't like it at Hollywood Bowl, but I feel like maybe I'm confusing you with someone else, but I feel like at one point a long time ago, you and I had a conversation that the crux of it was like, why weren't the metal detectors enough? Why did they have to go a step farther? But it was a long time ago. It was like maybe 5 years ago or more.
I don't know if that was me because I'm like,
I know you didn't like it at Hollywood Bowl.
I just don't. As far as I understood, the United States was a constitutional republic where freedom reigned supreme. So anything that attempts to usurp that by attempting to make this a police state is repulsive to me.
I completely get that. I like, there's no, like, for me, it's just like, the part I never understand is that, do they think if someone is determined, they're not going to figure out how to create something that is going to not show up in a metal detector or a porno scanner or whatever it is. And so like on some level, all of this stuff is nonsense, but no matter how anti you are, like this is how far down the road it's gone that it's like, oh, a metal detector seems nice compared to the porno scanner. You know what I mean? It's awful.
Did I tell you what happened to me when I failed the pat down?
You failed the pat down?
I failed the pat down. They do the pat down and then they have that little piece of fabric and they put the fabric in the machine and some alarm goes off. Now it was Mercury retrograde. I knew that was the reason, but I'm not stupid enough to say that to TSA. So I get pulled off into a private room with 2 female assists, and looking back, I wish I'd just dropped trow, bend over and spread my cheeks super wide. Yeah. But all they did was unbutton the top button of my jeans and feel the inside of my waistband. And I'm like, ladies, please, like, I honor your work ethic, and I feel like if we're going to go through this sham together, then let's commit to the sham. Because if you think that I'm bringing contraband onto the plane, as a woman, we all know where it is. So how committed are you to your job and to these theatrics? And they were like, just get out of here. So
I one time went to visit one of my good friends from back in the early rave days, right? Who ended up in federal prison for 10 years. And I went to visit him in federal prison, right? And when I went, his sister called me the day before and like told me all the protocol, because there's like you have to go through all sorts of stuff to be allowed in.
yeah.
And one of the things she told me was, once I take a shower and leave my hotel or my house, not to touch anything that's not mine. Don't stop at the gas station. Don't go to a fast food restaurant or anything like that, because whatever they do, they have a thing like that there, that it will, if the person who was at the gas station right before you had smoked a joint or had touched drugs and touched the gas thing, it is so sensitive. She's like, once, like, like, you're going to love this. This is going to explain to everybody the nature of the family I come from. My father was driving me to federal prison to see my friend. He drove up to Northern California with me and we made a trip of it, right? Aww. My dad really likes this person. So, and if this person is happening to be watching right now, hello, and sorry, I haven't called in a long time, I will. This person now has an excellent job at Berkeley and is doing like better in life on some level in terms of providing for themselves than you or I are, right? But okay, and hasn't really had to sell out to do it, so that's what's been impressive, right? Nice. He refused to sell out, which is part of how he ended up in federal prison, right? So my dad drove me, so I didn't have to touch anything and whatever it is. But I could see, like, if you were going to visit and you had to be on a bus or you had to be doing something like that to go, like how hairy of a situation that could turn out to be. So I was glad she had warned me of that. But back to the task at hand here. I'm traveling, hence the different background. But it seems that the feather orbs or the plasma intelligence, whatever we are deciding it is currently, has followed me, and they've showed themselves multiple times in Dani and I's pre-show. So Laner, be on the lookout, right? There probably will be a sighting. There was like one weird one, like just straight across like that I haven't quite seen before. And then there was one that did like that sort of strange like trajectories that UFOs do and stuff, right?
I'm calling them nano spooks.
Nano spooks, right? Who sent them?
Obviously the intelligence agencies. Duh.
Okay. So we're here to talk about the sham show. We're talking about really interesting stuff, but we can return to the sham show here if we like. All right, where should we start this week?
I don't know what you're bringing to the table. So should we like kind of lay out what we have? I have Eric Weinstein, I have Jill Stein, I have RFK and Shenanigans, and I have Glenn Greenwald. Maybe Glenn Greenwald, to kind of pick up from last week when we got so many comments on like, what is Dani smoking that she doesn't think that Glenn Greenwald is a journalist.
Okay, so I have so the Glenn Greenwald video that you brought, I also watched. And so like, right. So I had thought about bringing that, but since you were bringing it, you sent me a thing saying you were. I have a video from Ron Paul talking about something that just happened this week. That's not surprising and totally gross. And then I have an article from the AP about Biden and Trump agreeing to debate terms. And some of the things from that article are interesting. So those are my main things. So you have some more clips than I do, but let's go through. Let's start with Glenn Greenwald, and then we'll just figure out what feels good after that. How's that? Okay,
that sounds good. Do you have that one ready to go?
I have it ready to go. Do you have it?
For folks who didn't read the comment section from last week, I was mistaken. I was wrong. I did not know that much about Glenn Greenwald. I had no idea about the extent of his legit journalizing. So just to put an end to that conversation, I was wrong.
So just so everyone knows, if they were wondering about some of my curious looks last week, right? I was trying to figure out if Dani was punking me, or if like maybe because she did go to journalism school, that she doesn't count people who didn't go to journalism school as journalists. But I'm like, no, because that would mean I'm not qualified for anything. And Dani, frequently comes to me for advice on this, that, or the other thing, right? So it couldn't have been that. And so I looked it up, and it was like, yeah, he won a Pulitzer Prize.
That's where I was like, okay, like, so I'm not as familiar with him as you, and clearly our audience. I just thought he was a lawyer. I knew that he started off as a blogger, and I know that sometimes the line between blogging and journalism can get fuzzy. So I was confused, but it leads into this clip that we're about to go into, where I'm like, I don't understand what's going on with Glenn.
Okay. So, right. So, that was in a different way. That was my question last time. Right. And so like, I've heard one other person address the thing that I addressed, Lauren Chen, right, addressed it, but she also said the similar thing that we did, that she's going to go out on a limb and just say he probably has documents that he can't show because it would reveal who gave them to him. So that was why he included the word allegedly in his article, right? Like he didn't say like, I have this on, statement of fact or whatever it is, right? He said allegedly, but it was weird, and it was off brand for him that it had caught my attention.
Right. So, and I also think most journalists would say, documents that we obtain from unnamed sources, like that's pretty standard. But the curiosity continues with this week's clip.
All right, so here we go. Gonna pull it up, share sound, optimize video clip. Here we go. Fair use. So I'm gonna make it small. Here we go.
If you had to identify the most significant political development in the West over the last 7 or 8 years, you would be hard pressed to identify something more consequential than the sudden emergence of the so-called anti-disinformation industry. You have all kinds of people in academia, in politics, and especially in media proclaiming themselves with no explanation to be anti-disinformation experts or disinformation warriors, people saving the country, becoming the bulwark between ourselves and all of the harms of being deceived through disinformation. And as we've demonstrated and recounted several times, this is a credential that is completely fake. There's no such thing as being a disinformation expert. There's no person who's more capable or more competent to identify disinformation than others as sort of a floating expertise. Obviously, when it comes to medicine, you would rather...
I think that's extremely important, and I'm so happy to hear him saying this, that he's like unraveling this giant fraud called the disinformation industry. So I just wanted to toss in my 2 cents. We keep going.
Yep. Okay.
Listen to a surgeon than someone completely untrained in medicine. If it comes to engineering, you'd prefer to listen to someone trained as an engineer than someone who's not. If it comes to aviation, someone who's trained as a pilot rather than someone who's not. That's obvious, but there's nobody who's capable of just being a floating all-purpose disinformation expert. And yet that is the claim that they've made. They have organizations, new organizations, amply funded by many billionaires and Google and Facebook and the US security state, because disinformation has become the excuse, along with hate speech, for why we need to have the government censor the internet and why we should trust the government to do so, because they're working with anti-disinformation experts. And the irony always is that the very sectors of media and politics who claim that they are the ones who are standing tall and firm combating disinformation are the people who get caught spreading lies more than anybody, more frequently, more harmfully than anybody. One of those people who is a perfect test case, a perfect illustration of this dynamic, is the former White House press secretary for Joe Biden and now the current MSNBC host, Jen Psaki. She has lied repeatedly over many years, always with an obvious intent and result to advance her pro-Democratic Party agenda. She doesn't just lie.
Obviously with an obvious intent, always with an obvious intent and result. So we're getting into it, but just start to notice Glenn is starting to step outside the boundaries. And the reason why I paused to say that I was agreeing with him is because I love this topic, which is why I was so disappointed to see him go a little bit off the rails, but just watch where he takes it.
Arbitrarily or through carelessness or recklessness. It's obviously intentional and calculated because all of her lies are designed to advance the same political.
It's obviously intentional and calculated. We do not know anyone's intentions ever. He's really stepping out of line. Continue.
Political cause, namely the promotion of the Democratic Party. And yet so happens, as happens today, Jen Psaki gets caught lying. This queen of anti-disinformation who constantly hectors and sermonizes and just goes on and on about how important it is to combat disinformation is herself one of the most prolific agents of disinformation. Earlier today, it was Axios that pointed out an obviously false passage in Jen Psaki's new book, which I'm certain liberals are going to put on the bestseller list, just like they did with Liz Cheney before her and every other anti-Trump book. And here in Axios, you see the headline, which is pretty straightforward, quote, Jen Psaki's new book falsely recounts Biden's watch check in a troop ceremony. As you may recall, Joe Biden appeared at a ceremony to commemorate the soldiers who were killed during the U.S. withdrawal in Afghanistan in 2021, when there was a very poorly planned withdrawal where they told the American people that they had vanquished the Taliban wouldn't be coming back, and the Taliban marched right back in. And they had no plans against it. And as a result, many soldiers lost their lives at an attack on the Kabul airport and other places where the Taliban surged. And when Biden went to a ceremony, he offended many parents of soldiers killed, both in general and in that attack, for two reasons. One is that he pretended that he himself had gone through that, pretending that his son, Beau Biden, died in a combat attack in Iraq, when in fact his son died of brain cancer. Now, Joe Biden might argue, and I believe does argue, that the reason his son got brain cancer is because he served in Iraq where he was exposed to certain chemical agents. But he didn't die in Iraq, he didn't die in the war, he didn't die in combat. And yet whenever Joe Biden meets parents of combat soldiers who died on the battlefield, he always talks as if he himself understands that experience because his son also did. And they get offended because that's not true. But they also got offended because during the ceremony, he visibly showed that he was bored. He looked at his watch to try and determine how long he had to stay, how much longer he had to stay, when was this finally going to be over.
Stop.
It may not be the biggest deal in the world, but the media did what they should do, which was...
He just made up so much shit right there. It's completely out of hand. That's all we need to hear. So It's twofold. One, that we have a 30-minute segment on one line in her book. It's like, is this what news has come to, that it gets so much attention? But he said he was bored. He looked at his watch because. So unless Glenn is a psychic mind reader, it's completely not okay, unethical in journalism to fill in the blanks as to people's motivations. Like, all we can do is comment on what they did, not why we think they did what they did. So I'm confused as to why a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist is filling in so many blanks, especially on something so insignificant and flimsy. Like, it's not to say Jen Psaki isn't a complete disinformation agent propagandist, but the fact that he's going so granular on something so stupid and then being so reckless in his unpacking of it is confusing to me.
Okay, so a couple of things. I think we talked about this when we were on the phone the other day or something. Like, during his show, if you listen to the whole thing from start to finish, right? He often will distinguish between when he is sort of filling his lawyer shoes, his journalist shoes, his editorial or opinionizing shoes, right? Like, he doesn't always do that, but I think his show, different than his writing when he was writing for The Guardian or writing for The Intercept, is a mixture of opinion and journalism and law and whatnot, right? So he also sometimes does like what some people refer to almost as like comedy pieces, because he just is so like sarcastic, and it's some of it is kind of funny. So I think some of this comes from the fact that, like, I think this is some of these issues, maybe not the thing about how many times he looked at his watch, but the conflation of having died on the battlefield with dying from brain cancer. These are things that he's been pointing out that Joe Biden and the people who protect him have been lying about for a long time. And finally, she got called out on it by someone on the left.
Yep.
And so had to address it. And so I think there's like a satisfaction, just like sometimes like when there's been something you and I have been picking at for years, and somebody with a bigger platform than us finally catches on, it's kind of like, it satisfies this itch that, like, even though it's stupid because we don't need someone else to verify what we know we saw with our own eyes, it does satisfy something. So I think that he's taking like a victory lap or whatever, like kind of thing with that. But also, you know, when you and I critique people, we also comment on their body language and whatnot. But there was people there was quotes from parents or people, I think, in the article who had said that. So it was not just his observation, but he was quoting what other people had said in the report that finally made her address it. Right. So I think that I'm not sure what his intentions were when he said these things, but the clip that I saw was a little bit different than the one that you just played. Like the thing that I saw, the segment where he talked about it, that was in the middle of the clip, not towards the beginning. So maybe I saw sort of like a different prior and post to that part, that thing right there. So that's one possibility. Like those are the range of possibilities. The other thing is I think he is getting even more squirrely than the rest of us are getting about the impending loss of free speech worldwide that's happening, because he's in Brazil. That I know it feels like impossible to, like, it's bad here with this anti-Semitism awareness act or whatever, but there they literally have like a Supreme Court judge that is like completely out of control, and he's already been investigated, and his show on Rumble doesn't even get shown. There's no Rumble in Brazil. So in the country he lives in, he's like, his show is not aired. And so I think that any of these people who work in this industry that have created this scenario where free speech is going to be, you know, squelched worldwide, I think he has an extra level of resentment and vitriol and hatred for. And so there's a bunch of stuff there. It would be, but I would like to, if I had the clip that I watched, there was a little bit more detail on sort of where he got that idea about the watch, the checking the watch kind of thing. Anywho, so.
I was very happy to hear him talking about the disinformation, misinformation landscape. Later in the clip, he goes into Nina Jankowicz, and like, I am in agreement with everything that he's saying, but it's something that I've seen the mainstream media do with Trump for the past however many years that Trump has been their number one enemy, is to claim to know psychically Trump's intentions and to prop up their psychic knowingness and brand it as journalism. So I was surprised to hear him do that. We have no idea why he was checking it. Honestly, we don't. Maybe he just shit his pants and he was wondering how long it would be until he could go get some toilet paper. Maybe he had to take his medicine. Maybe it's an Apple Watch and it beeped. I'm just saying, we actually don't know. And everything that he said, even though I thought it was minute in terms of this example with Psaki, was right on the ball. But when he moved into the realms of claiming to know his intentions, he's doing that thing that I've been very frustrated in watching the mainstream media doing, which has nothing to do with journalism. That's all.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think he might, I don't know what he would say. So it is just me guessing at this point that he would say that his show is a combination of journalism, opinion pieces, editorializing, and dry humor, and absolute irritation at and oy vey, right? Basically oy vey. So yeah. Okay. Are we good on that clip?
We're good on that clip.
All right. So where should we go next? Should we go to, I guess let's stay on Biden. because I just daisy chained them together.
Yep.
So I saw when I was on the airplane today that Biden had put out his list of terms that like his terms that he needed to have agreed to in order to debate, right? And so I'm click on it thinking,
Wait, let me guess number one. Jim Carrey is playing me in the debate.
well, like basically when I clicked on that, I thought like when I saw that, I thought, okay, this is going to be like an insane list that is going to make it impossible for there to be debates, right? So I was prepared for that. And I was, but I guess, you know, when I clicked on it, a few hours had already passed since these stories had came out and they had already agreed. So whatever the terms had been accepted already, right? So I'm like, okay, well, this is interesting. Right. But there's a bunch of minutia in the article. This is an article from AP. There's a bunch of minutia. But the most important part with the stuff was kind of all in one segment, right? And here's the most important part, I think. The two campaigns, so the debates are not going to be hosted by the Commission on Presidential Debates, right? They're going to be hosted by the television networks themselves. Like the television network always airs them and arranges the stuff and whatever, but the decisions are usually made by the debate commission.
Right.
But the two campaigns and television networks had held weeks of informal talks on ways to circumvent the commission's grip on presidential debates following years of complaints and perceived slights, right? So I'm not saying that I think that the Commission on Presidential Debates is an honorable organization necessarily, but it's fascinating to me that like for all the disagreements they have, they agreed that they wanted to circumvent the way that things had been done for at least the last 2 election cycles or or whatever it is. Right. So that was kind of interesting to me. Right.
Also, according to 2 people familiar with the matter, what kind of expertise is that? I'm familiar with Purina cat chow. Am I an expert on the matter, qualified to opine?
Right. Well, this is how it works in these situations. I'm not saying, right. Okay. But then Biden's campaign had proposed excluding third-party candidates, such as Robert F. Kennedy Jr. from the debates outright. Under the debate commission's rules, Kennedy or other third-party candidates could qualify if they had secured ballot access sufficient to claim 270 electoral votes and polled at 15% or higher. But both CNN and ABC announced the same qualification threshold. So it's interesting that they didn't go for that, but that was Biden's most important proposal, was that we exclude third-party candidates, right?
Yep.
And that right. So okay. So in response to this, Kennedy accused Biden and Trump, because I guess Trump, would have been okay with that, but it was the CNN and the ABC that had, weren't willing to change their thing. In response, Kennedy accused Biden and Trump of trying to exclude me from their debate because they are afraid that I would win. He said, keeping viable candidates off the debate stage undermines democracy. How dare we do that? Ron Paul, who we'll watch later, has something to say about that. And so, it gives a little history about, who's been in charge of debates up until now. And then there was some arguing back and forth about when the dates of the debates should be. Now they're going to be June 27th and then one in September. Trump was wanting earlier debates. Biden was wanting later debates, right? So they argued mostly about dates. And then Biden was still mad because last time they let Trump debate without having to take a COVID test first and dumb shit like that, right? But the part that I thought was the most interesting is this whole idea of that they were colluding to circumvent, right? That to circumvent the sort of prior established order of things, and then that Biden's first order of business was keep third parties off the debate stage, right? So that's been decided today. So apparently Biden will debate, right? And I think as things stand right now, I don't know what percentage Kennedy is at, right? But if that holds true what they said, I think
he's over 15%.
That's what I'm saying. So even though they're pretending like it would be between the two of them, I think if things hold where they're at right now, Bobby would be included, which is not surprising to me, right? But I'm sure that that 15% is probably too high for Jill Stein or any of the others to to be involved. So there's no danger of any, any talk about the issue with this, right? Like none of that. All of the important issues are pretty much off the table. And yeah, so that was.
I wonder if it's performative, if Biden's like pretending to not want Kennedy, even though Kennedy may ultimately be the Democratic Party's established candidate.
Yeah, that's what I think. I mean, I think I think the whole thing so I think there's levels, there's layers, right? I think they have option 1 that is their preferred thing. Option 2 would be like they're cool with it. Option 3 is like not our favorite, but it's like a Hail Mary to make sure that we avoid, blah, blah, blah. And I think that the Kennedy plan is probably either option 2 or 1. I don't even think it's the last option. Like, right. I think that that's such a safe option for them because it's just a different path to get to the same place that they want to go. Of course, they like the most mind controlled, the most completely devoid of any like conscious anything path, but in place of that, they'll take anything that gets them to the same place.
Pretty much.
Yeah. So anywho, okay, where would you like to go next?
Let's do RFK Shanahan since we're talking about him and we could just seamlessly slide in.
All right, here we go.
Did you watch this video, by the way?
I had started watching it the first few minutes of it before you ever sent it to me, and it was just too gagalicious for me, but I will suffer for you, my friend.
Well, there's a method to the madness, so.
Awesome. Here we go.
Fair use. Fair use.
Tech used to be the symbol of everything good, right? We were going to use tech for the benefit of humanity.
I don't know why it won't go small. I'm trying to make it small and it's not doing
it. I don't know why she thought wearing that outfit.
But I started seeing...
The New York Times reported this week that the Biden campaign already has raised $1.1 billion. They're going to use it to try to keep other people off the ballot.
And you've called people out. And you have been very, very accurate in your assessment of what went wrong and why. There's no interest right now within the party on actual solutions. How are you doing?
I am great. More to the point, how are you?
It's been 3 weeks and 3 days since the announcement.
33.
And
exactly.
Right? There's always that. Can't let that go.
That's right.
It's been wonderful. I am so proud to be part of this ticket, proud to be supporting you, proud of all the people who are working on this.
Do other vice presidents say, I'm proud to be supporting you versus running alongside of you? Or was she just letting us know that she's bankrolling his whole sham?
This is called revelation of the method, externalization of the hierarchy, all of that kind of stuff. But when she was talking about how proud she was, I just heard in my ear, do you remember the gymnast Kathy Rigby?
Of course, I went to Kathy Rigby gymnastics camp in Ojai every summer.
Okay, so post gymnastics career, she became a broadcaster, Peter Pan, and a singer. And I remember one time, like they were interviewing her, like about her gymnastics career and her life after that, like in a break between events in a gymnastics meet, she was commentating. And there was like, they showed her in the studio singing and she was singing, and I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm right. And I heard her singing in my ear when Nicole Shenanigans was telling us how proud she was. I don't know how proud Kathy Rigby is right now. Like, I don't know, maybe, I don't know if she's a mind control bot at this point or if she is still proud to be, I don't know the whole thing, but that's how my mind works. Like I'm like one of those people who hears like Broadway show tunes to like go along with every event that's unfolding in front of me. Yeah. All right, here we go.
Aligned around this vision for a healthy America, that we can finally move past the chaos of the last 10 years.
And we'll keep, what I just
that there's
we'll
hope.
Keep everybody healthy with my Sherlock home testing device.
Correct.
For a new model for peace within this country and prosperity, and a new model for peace and prosperity abroad as well.
Look at her face.
And
she's saying
an end to.
But how is
for peace and prosperity in this country? Like, she looks like someone just died. Where's your energy? You're supposed to be a leader.
But also, why is she supposed to be in charge of prosperity for the rest of the world? Like, peace maybe, like, like we should all be involved in peace, but like however each country runs their own economy should be the subject of their government.
Right. They're letting us know that they're running for the
Global government.
world global. Yeah.
Yes.
Using the political system in ways that it wasn't intended to be used.
I mentioned to you because we had lunch before this podcast, but I think about you all the time about the impact of this on you, because most people who go into
Are they sleeping
politics, even
together?
though I did not intend to run for
Thinks about her
president,
all the
I've
time.
I
spent
know. That's exactly what I was thinking. I was like,
Whoa,
I
keep
can
it in
see
your
the
pants.
my
Hey,
life thinking about politics and kind of understanding it and working in campaigns, and
go back a
and
couple seconds.
also under.
Do you remember when there was like an Alyssa Milano sex tape video where she was talking about how badly we needed to bomb Syria?
No.
Right? I could imagine like if they were like sleeping together, that the topic would be
Totally.
would be like, we gotta get those bombs to Israel and the Iron Dome. I'm gonna watch Here Comes My Iron Dome, baby.
All right, back it up just 10 seconds where he
All right.
explains to us why he's qualified because he's the child of politicians.
All right.
Run for president, I've spent my life thinking about politics and kind of understanding it and working in campaigns, and also understanding, over the past 16 years how some of these issues turn your best friends against you, and cause all these kind of
Why did we cut to her?
personal disruptions in your life.
Huh?
I don't understand why they just cut to her. She didn't say anything.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay.
Weird editing.
And I think about you and think, I had essentially 6 years of preparation for this, even longer, because my first convention was when I was 6 years old, at the Democratic National Convention, and I've been thinking about politics my whole life. But what would it be like for somebody who, had 1 week to think about this decision, and then was plunged into this incredible
1 week.
1 week? What kind of fly by the seat of your pants, sloppy, half-assed presidency is he attempting to step into? 1 week?
Well, but also like they haven't been being groomed for this their entire life. Come on.
Right.
just cascade of turbulence and, hope, for embodying so much hope for so many people as you do, but also becomes the flashpoint for anger and resentment and bitterness. And then the friend.
Is the hope that we marry rich, fuck Elon Musk, get ourselves famous by sleeping with famous? I don't understand what is she inspiring? What has she done? Who is she aside from partnered with Event 201, Moskowitz?
Yeah.
But we need to continue. I'm sorry, but there is a point.
Okay. My computer is doing some weird things, so I'm trying to fix it, but.
Who you lose and the political alliances, and what's that been like for you from a personal standpoint?
Overall, it's been really interesting because, look at the news. Puck News just put out yesterday an article called "The Shanahan Persuasion Campaign," and it outlines all the ways the DNC and people very close to me over the years have been trying to persuade me to step down from running on this ticket with you. And my experience has been 90% very positive. And again, this is one of these other signals. I've been talking about all of these signals about support, or silent signals and pockets of support around the country for your campaign. And that's been my experience too. Abundantly positive. And then there's about this 10% of folks that are still tied to this narrative of you have to spit hate at the other because that's how politics is done. And that 10% is super loud. They're really, really loud. And they have a strategy to them that reminds me more of being bullied in high school than it does of the sportsmanship you would expect of our political system.
That's a great word to use, sportsmanship, because there's another word that traditionally was used, and it was called comedy, which is comity, which is kind of a.
So we can continue with this. I'll leave it up to you. But what ensues is her offering more and more complaints. And if there was any sort of confusion as to whether she aligns left, whether she aligns right, whether she aligns centrist, whether she's an independent thinker, she's so clearly a mind-controlled leftist, because I watched about half of this, and all it is her complaining about how hard this is for her. She says it's been 90% positive, but she doesn't talk about the positive things. They don't talk about their visions for how they're going to make it better. All she talks about is her own personal hell and how hard this has been for her, and victimizing herself the same way everyone under that kind of leftist Wetiko mind virus gets stuck
Cool,
doing.
I like that you called it the Wetiko. Yeah, right. I like it. Well, it's also what he does. He always gives a history lesson on his family and
Yes.
talks about what Facebook and Instagram has done. Like we all know this already, but he has to set the table for dinner every time with that, right?
Yes.
And very like that takes up like 90% of the conversation, and then 10% is left for like the meat of the issues, right? And like, you know, nothing that needs to get dug into ever gets dug into, because when you only have 10% of your time left, all you can do is skim over the top. And that's the whole point, right? So
Exactly. And for this being the first, as I understand it, this is the first podcast I've seen them do together. And
Right.
the fact that they weren't talking about policy, talking about their vision, talking about that we would do, being positive and kind of lifting one another up in terms of their enthusiasm for all the good work they were going to do for the American people, it's just her bitching.
Well, it seems more like the point is not to make like arguments or lay down policies that are more substantive than Donald Trump or Joe Biden. It's just that like it's like they're better looking. It's like they're
Correct.
auditioning for the Friends version of the presidency.
Correct.
Right? Yeah.
Got
Okay.
those nice kind of like African mud cloths behind her. Like, okay.
Right.
Yeah.
We don't need to listen to any more of that. I think
No.
that-
It's just the same old. But I just wanted us, I'm guessing most of the people listening have not heard Shenanigans speak.
Right.
So I wanted us to just see what she's presenting.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything from her that leads me to believe that she has the intelligence or the sort of imagination or whatever it is to have created all of the things that they say that she has created, right? And so it's completely like looking for actors to play the role of someone who has done A to Z, right? So
Correct. I think
okay.
the fact of the matter is that he thinks about her all the time.
Totally. I think that's right. Oy, all right. Okay, so next, so we have a Jill Stein clip left, an Eric Weinstein clip, and then we have my Ron Paul clip
Let's do Weinstein, Ron Paul, and then if there's time, Jill.
with Jill Stein. All right, here we go. Democracy Unplugged. Let's unplug democracy, please.
Now, with I mean, there's no point at this time, it would just be repeating it, but anytime I'm presenting a clip with Eric or Brett appearing on someone else's podcast, we can all just assume, and it's right every time, that the first 2 to 3 minutes are going to be the host telling us why these are the smartest people walking the face of the earth. This was no exception.
Okay, so we're skipping those minutes, right?
We're skipping those minutes.
Okay, cool. Sounds
We're welcome.
good. All right, make it small.
Fair
Yeah.
use.
Fair use. Here we go. All right, have it at the mark you like.
A way that really got to the root of the issue around sharp elbows and power and the need for rigorous research. But are you afraid to be canceled?
I've been canceled. And people don't understand what canceled means. I bet if most of you were polled, you'd get it wrong. Canceled doesn't mean you can't go on Joe Rogan and reach the audience of the largest show on earth. Canceled means you can't appear on media that must be taken seriously by institutions. So the entire idea is that, if you remember Bishop Barclay and a tree falling in the woods, doesn't make a sound. The issue is that if I say something on Joe Rogan, nobody at the State Department has to respond to it as a question at a press conference. There's no institutional pressure to change. So we can say all the truth we want, we can say it at scale, but we can't get heard by the things that have to respond to us. So when I say Jeffrey Epstein told me that he ran a multi-billion-dollar hedge fund that traded currencies, and I say that hedge fund had to have made filings to the Securities and Exchange Commission, nobody has to follow that up and say, where are those filings? Because they report that he's a disgraced financier, and I haven't seen any evidence that this hedge fund exists.
Pause.
So, yeah.
So we'll come back to his redefining of cancel culture, but he's taken upon itself to call the State Department and let them know how they should be investigating this to do their job. It's interesting how he and Brett are qualified to do everyone else's job for them.
Well, correct. And also, like, him telling us what canceled means is kind of like people telling us what we see in our psychedelic trips, what that means to me.
Correct.
Right? Like,
Correct.
It's one of these things that is like, it's not important work. It is not a service to humanity, right? Like, as you said before we started, just like watch what your cat does when you give them catnip, and then you understand the nature of reality there, right? So, but no, like this is, I mean.
By the way, I think he mentioned being on Joe Rogan at least a dozen times, at least in this interview alone.
So, like, can you imagine the gall of somebody who's been on the Joe Rogan podcast and complains that they don't get enough attention?
Wow.
Right?
And notice nowhere in his definition of being canceled is like losing your payment processing, being kicked off of platforms. We would all be wrong if that's what we
Because he works for the company that cancels people's payment processing.
Correct.
Right? If you say something bad about Israel, then right kind of thing. So
correct.
Yeah.
So I will harken back to him telling us that he and his family suffered immeasurable financial hardship when he was demonetized on YouTube.
Right. Yeah, Brett. I don't know that Eric was.
Oh
Okay.
no, Eric said that.
Oh, Eric too was demonetized.
Eric said
The
that.
conspiracy against the Weinsteins.
Of course.
All right.
Next is 21 minutes, 32 seconds.
All right. 21 minutes. All right, here we go.
And a lot of that has to do with political economy. It has to do with the fact that you can't just mumble truth, free speech, democracy, and wind up with a moderate, prosperous society. There's no formula that says that works. What if you have a large number of incredibly intolerant people, and you say, here, have a democracy, and they say, great, I'm going to the voting booth and I'm going to vote in a totalitarian regime. Well, then democracy lasted for one election. I think you had this situation happen in Algeria at some point. With free speech, I'm going to say something nobody likes to hear. You can either restrain bad behavior through culture, or you can do it through rules. And I have an aphorism, which is that I want to belong to a country where I'm absolutely free to burn its flag, and it never occurs to me to do so. The problem that we have is that there's a contingent of people who say free speech is amazing because I can be a complete jerk and there's nothing you can do about it. Yay, free speech. And my point is we can afford a small number.
Have you ever heard anyone who's a proponent of free speech say that that's the reason why they're for free speech?
No.
Neither have I.
I hear lots of people say that they understand that putting up with that is the cost of free speech, but that's why they want free speech.
Right, but according to the world's smartest man, that is why
Correct.
people want free speech.
Yes.
Continue. The blowhard has more to say.
Yeah.
Of you. But meanwhile, back in the adultosphere, most of us have to act with restraint. We have to not push the boundaries of free speech so that it reverses, and then we get no culture but very strong rules. And so in part, somehow in the US, it doesn't come with an owner's manual. It's a very complicated, counterintuitive country. And we hope that you learn it in civics. And basically the American dream was a dividend to get people who would never use free speech, never need free speech.
The American dream was a dividend?
Yeah. And you can continue if there, let me see. Oh no, we go till 2318. Sorry, I jumped the gun.
Okay.
To participate in a complicated system that they couldn't understand. At least you'll get rich. At least you'll have a swimming pool. At least you'll have a third car in the driveway. And I think part of the problem is that a lot of us are going to have to get comfortable with things that are ugly. I want a border. I'm a restrictionist.
Okay, stop.
Now, what is
So he's amping up this is why we need controlled speech. But I will give him credit because at least he's explaining why. He thinks that the only way for the country to get back to economic prosperity is for the rest of us to shut up.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, last one, which you personally will love, 2836.
28. All right, here we go.
I don't know, it's not an economic analysis, it's a demographic analysis of supply. We can't have these lies at these levels. We need adult fiction, adult public-spirited fiction that represents reality. We're not going to get the truth. I think we all need to understand that the truth is very hard to come by. But there is adult public-spirited fiction that allows you to participate in a participatory democracy, and we don't have anything remotely close to it. And that's why so many of us got famous in podcast space. Yeah. Because we were making more sense
But
than
I
the...
think he just spilled the beans on democracy there. That it's an adult fiction.
That's it. That's it for Eric.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
All right, my face turned red for the first time today. I love it. All right. All right, perfect. Okay, so now we'll move on to Ron Paul. And I love watching. So as we're watching these two, recognize that these two are like the complete inverse or opposite of you and I, right? Two like just just notice the irony, right? It's fun.
Okay. They're a clown world inversion.
Totally.
Well, I think big government has a lot to do with that. I put a lot of blame on the United Nations and others who think they can design the world. But right now, the design of the world by the warmongers is we got to go for Massie and ridicule him and show him he's an enemy of the people and he's not for democracy. Oh, that's bad. So they have an organization that is set up to systematically, campaign against them with a bigger goal at the end, destroy the principles of peace and prosperity.
Yeah, it's interesting. Let's put up that first clip now. This is what it's all about. Pro-Israel PAC, guns for Massie. I think we lost our picture here. Guns for Massie. Did Speaker Johnson encourage the attack? And there are two things happening here. One, I don't know, maybe we can put it up now, but the first thing that's happening is that a front group of AIPAC has done a $300,000 ad purchase against Thomas Massie. And as you point out, Thomas, I think their primary is coming up in a few days. He's got a couple challengers. Doesn't look like anything very serious. So they're putting up an ad buy against him to try to weaken him. And the second part of this is whether Speaker Johnson encouraged the ad buy. So those are two things going on. They're trying to hurt him in his race. But, here we go, here we have it. But is Speaker Johnson actively working against a Republican member of Congress? When you have a razor-thin majority of one and you start attacking your own party, it could be a big problem. Now let's look at the next one. This is what it's all about. This is a front group called United Democracy Project. Who could be opposed to that? Well, it's actually AIPAC in disguise. They announced they're pouring $300,000 into ads on Fox television affiliates in Massie's home state of Kentucky. We're trying to shine the light on the radical anti-Israel record of Tom Massie. Of course, it doesn't go by Tom. They don't even know who they're talking about. He says, we want every single voter in the state of Kentucky to know about his anti-Israel actions. But as you suggested in your opener, Dr. Paul, if you put the next one up, it's not really about this year because Massie is in good shape this year. It's very popular. With its statewide attack, AIPAC likely intends to influence the 2026 election as well. McClatchy reports that Massie is considered to be one of 3 favorites for the 2026 Republican nomination to replace retiring Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. Now we're going to play the ad, this 30-second ad. And first of all, I just want to say leave that up there if you don't mind, please. 2 things about it, Dr. Paul. First of all, and this is, it's written up in Zero Hedge article, it says, Israel, the Holy Land, under attack by Iran, Hamas, Hezbollah, and Congressman Tom Massie. And so putting it like this is so outrageous. It's such an absurd attack that actually when you look at the post on Twitter where they talk about it, what they call a ratio, it's the ratio between how many likes you have and how many comments. It's getting absolutely ratioed. 700 comments, all of them critical, versus just 100 likes on it. But let's watch the ad for yourself. And anyone who knows anything about Thomas Massie, look at this ad and tell us if you think this is anything remotely resembling Thomas Massie's positions.
Israel, the Holy Land, under attack by Iran, Hamas, Hezbollah, and Congressman Tom Massie. Republicans are trying to help Israel, but one Republican is standing in the way. It's Kentucky's Tom Massie. 15 times in April, Massie was the only Republican voting with anti-Israel radicals. Massie's votes, helpful for Iran, harmful to Israel. Everyone who cares about the Holy Land needs to know Tom Massie is hostile to Israel.
United Democracy Project is responsible for the content of this advertising.
To me, the real irony is, if people were honest and they want to pick out probably the best defender of the Constitution, would be Thomas Massie. Others very close, but for the most part, he is the champion of the Constitution. And just think of the energy and the hate and the involvement and the politicizing of all this is going into this for the sole purpose of destroying, the most student of the Constitution and the most consistent, principled voter there. And I should modify the most because there are others. But the whole thing is, it's such an irony of the energy they spend on this. And then to turn it into a hate speech and a hate ad. But you know what? I think it's sort of, there's a limit to how much garbage you have to listen to. And right now, I think that's what Trump is sort of proving. How much garbage can you throw at me before the people say, what are you people doing? Yeah. So I think when they look at an ad like that, I think that would get him more sympathy. And of course, since they know they can't beat him in the current election, what they want to do is send a big message to more people down the road, and why that type of voting and support can't be allowed. You can't hide behind the Constitution, common sense, and peace.
All right. So first, it was it was funny to watch them talk about almost word for word and idea after idea a few of the things that we've talked about several times, but they're 2 completely non-charismatic old men sniffling, right? And
they're so calm, collected. We're like
right? So I just thought I would draw the distinction. I thought that was kind of fun. And Ron Paul's getting so small and cute, and he's in that very cute old man stage, right? Okay, so I mean, we are the portion of the circus tent that we now reside in permanently, right? Is bonkers. But here's the thing with Thomas Massie, and I've talked about him before. Last week, I told people go watch that interview with Matthew Kibbe and whatever. We're beyond worrying whether people agree with us or whether even what they're saying is true necessarily. It's, are they being honest and consistent, right? Okay. So Thomas Massie, I heard him at the very beginning of the conflict say, personally, I'm kind of pro-Israel, but it offends my politics. My politics don't allow me, the political philosophy I believe in is non-interventionist and not sending not providing funds for anyone, even things that I would theoretically like or whatever it is, right? So here's a person who, based on principle, votes against his own personal interests, because he recognizes not only that that's his political philosophy and principle, but that the people who voted for him didn't vote for him because of the things that he thinks are good or bad or whatever, but because he's there to apply the principle he explained to them. And so that's the thing that's under attack. And this is, right, like the Israel thing is where this stuff becomes the most obvious, right? Because it pulls at all of these heartstrings about what happened back in history and about Christian Zion, like all of this kind of stuff, right? But this is what this really is they don't like having someone in there that cannot be bought, that cannot be pressured into. It's not even about going along with something. It's about abandoning the principle, right? Like the squad, those people, they're also, quote, anti-Israel, but they're not anti-Israel on sort of principle. They're anti-Israel on like, that is their political interest. And we all saw when AOC was crying on the House floor because Nancy Pelosi pressured her into voting present instead of no on the bill for the Iron Dome, right? Like that's what happens when it's not principle that you're, right? When it's about your feelings or what you personally like or dislike or want to be seen as supporting or not supporting, right? But when you're like, no, like these are the principles, and no matter how popular or unpopular that makes me, like that's just the deal, right? Then you get ads like that, which are much more vicious than any we've seen against AOC. The AOC ones just make her look dumb, but they're not like that. They're literally equating him with like Iran and Hamas. Like it's the dumbest ad I've ever seen.
That was insane.
Right? Like I can't, that was insane. So anywho, I wanted to share that. And but what's interesting is Mitch McConnell is one of the worst swamp creatures ever. So I think their analysis is right, that it's fine to let him diddle around in the House where he doesn't have that much power. But if he's going to replace, if he would be likely to become a senator in the next election, right? And so then you would have Rand Paul and Thomas Massie, two libertarian basically types from Kentucky, like that. Then you're starting to get into something a little different, and that's the long play that they're making, right? So they're seeding all of this stuff. It's very, it's gross. And then of course the hiding is the United Democracy.
Have you looked into that?
No, I just heard about it today. Like I just was pulling these clips when I was on the airplane. So
I'm just looking up real quick.
I mean, I imagine, I think it was in
the usual players, right?
Yeah, well, they said it was an AIPAC funded organization.
So we're looking at the same. It's probably like Bill Ackman money.
All that kind of stuff. Did you, like, I didn't get a chance to watch the video, but there was a video on like Redacted yesterday, or Breaking Points, talking about Bibi Netanyahu's new plan for Gaza 2035. And I didn't have a chance to watch it, but I'm wondering if it was one-to-one with Bill Ackman's plan for New Gaza that we played a few weeks back, right?
Probably, I would imagine. I would also like, for anyone who hasn't seen the show you did with Robert Phoenix, your most recent Matrix Mash, you got into really interesting stuff about Mike Johnson and how he's being positioned in this like the whole overall scheme.
So there was like, I could have played more of the clip, but like for reasonably brevity's sake, apparently there was a meeting in like of the Republican caucus or whatever it was. And other people other people who had not voted their principles, or who had not like who had voted for the funding or whatever it is for Israel, when they went home, their constituents were mad. And so they came back to Mike Johnson and said, hey, you told us this bill was going to be popular, but my constituents are mad, right? And so support started to grow for Thomas Massie's position. And apparently Mike Johnson said something that some people are perceiving as a verbal threat, that if people are backing or not wanting to support this, then he's happy to make a call to AIPAC to get them, people to run, AIPAC to have people run against them. And so the fact that that happened at the same time as the ad brings up the question, which they're not certain that there's like direct evidence yet of, though, that Mike Johnson called in the dogs to make the ad.
Right. They mentioned that briefly, but yeah, thanks for unpacking that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
Yeah. All right. Let's go to Jill Stein and then we'll go to the chat box.
Okay. Jill Stein, 4939, because everything rhymes now.
Why not?
This is the part of the show where everything rhymes.
Gotcha. Oops.
Both parties, Republican Party and Democratic Party, actually support, but he's not willing to do that. If you were president of the United States, what are some of the policies that you would implement by executive order?
Yeah, and let me tell you, this is part of our day one agenda. Okay, so it starts with ending all transfer of weapons and aid.
I did hear this part. I think I'm glad you picked this to play here.
To Israel and potentially other human rights abusers like Saudi Arabia too, but for sure with Israel. So the genocide is over on day one. We would free Julian Assange and Edward Snowden and Leonard Peltier and other political prisoners. We would also provide amnesty to all the incarcerated people who are serving time for the simple possession, use, or cultivation of marijuana and actually other substances as well. We would legalize cannabis.
This is not the meat of the
and
matter.
We would begin.
But for other substances as well? So is she on the like MAPS titty?
So my guess would be that she is not. I'm sure people who are in her campaign or in the Green Party are networked with those people. I don't think that like that's her crew, right? I think she just holds that traditional leftist position, the old school, my body, my choice, right? Like the old, right, kind of thing. So my guess would be that she's not like, you know, going to Aubrey's Ranch for parties or anything like that. Right. But that, like, you know, for her, like that could take shape in a number of ways. And if that's one of them, she's fine with that. Right.
Okay.
Process of legalizing all drugs, or shall we say decriminalizing initially all drugs, so that drug use or misuse is dealt with as a public health problem, not as a criminal problem. So that all begins on day one, including the legalization of marijuana, and probably psilocybin would be thrown in there as well. We would declare a climate emergency on day one, so that at that point it becomes possible to shut down this development of fossil fuels that impact the coastline at all, because the coastlines can be regulated on an emergency basis. So Joe Biden has authorized 22 liquid natural gas export facilities, and most of these were approved in the wake of the Nord Stream sabotage, the most destructive act of environmental sabotage ever in history, yet it's gone uninvestigated. In a rather suspicious way. We've not investigated that, whereas spray painting.
Does she not know that it's our own CIA that did that? Is she truly that naive?
I mean, I'm of many minds about it, right? Like I don't know if she's naive or if she just there's this thing with like a lot of leftists, particularly a lot of like older hippie type of leftists, where they're like, yeah, we know that that's the truth, but you're never going to get anywhere talking about that. So why talk about that? Right.
Well,
like
then why investigate? If that's right.
Correct. Like that's the whole, like it's the wink, wink, nod, nod, right? Kind of thing, like acknowledging it's not been investigated. I know it will never be investigated, but I'm like pretending like I care.
That's going to be her day one executive order.
Right.
So my point, I mean, we can stop it here, is just, and I mentioned this before with RFK, is they're not even pretending that if they're elected, they're going to be operating as a constitutional republic or anything vaguely democratic. What she's telling us is, I'm going to be a dictator from day one, and here are all the tyrannical moves that I'm going to make without any consensus from the electorate, because we're not even pretending that this is a republic anymore.
Correct. Right. And when, it's interesting because like, it's not like smooth when Trump says, I'm going to be a dictator, but just for one day on day one, but she's essentially saying the same thing.
100%.
And nobody accuses her of being a dictator, right? Type of thing. But let me ask you this question. Like, for me, this is like, I'm not a voting person and I think it's all nonsense. Is there any executive order you would ever be okay with?
Well, again, so I'm put in the position right now of Thomas Massie. Like, in my personal, individualized Dani heart, sure, I want to get us out of the WHO. I want to get rid of the Patriot Act. I want to get rid of the Smith Modernization Act. There are a bunch of things, but that's not in alignment with our allegedly democratic process. So I'm conflicted. Like, if we want to acknowledge that we're no longer living in that system and we're just electing different dictators and tyrants, then sure, it comes down to like my personal preferences versus my allegiance to the alleged ideals upon which this nation was based.
So what about an executive order to take us back to just the original lines of the Constitution?
Yeah, I would totally be for that.
So you'd be for that. Okay.
I mean, I think the only executive order I would be for would be getting us out of the Patriot Act, because it's illegal and it's strangling us all. But I would still have an issue with that because that's not how this is supposed to go.
So, I mean, for me, the whole, like, I see the whole thing, I see government, the idea of government is too restrictive and part of the problem. So for me, it doesn't matter on some levels, but if the idea is that this is a constitutional republic and we've gotten away from that, then getting back to that, like right, like is that going against the constitutional republic to do an executive order to take you back to the Constitution, right? It's like one of these chicken egg kind of conversations, right?
I would be for that. I mean, because I looked up executive order, like I've done a little bit of research on it, and it's vaguely written, like they're not necessarily breaking the laws when they're doing it. Right. But I think that would be the one executive order I would get behind. Just take us straight back to the Constitution.
And would your would your executive order be for the Constitution of the United States or the Constitution for the United States of America?
Are these two different documents?
Some would say yes.
Well, what's the difference between them?
So there's the story out there, right, that the Constitution for the United States is the original one. And when the United States became a corporation, or, right, then there was the Constitution of the United States. So, right, so the Constitution for, and I think with the inclusion of America, it's been so long since this was my jam. Like I used to be really into researching this kind of stuff, or whatever. But yeah, there's this idea that there's two separate documents, literally separate governments, right? And that jurisdictions and all of that kind of stuff, right?
I need to do more research.
Yeah.
I need to do more.
I just thought I'd throw that in just for shits and giggles. All right, let's go to the chat room and see what the kids have to say. All right, as always, all caps, questions, comments, thoughts, concerns, blah, blah, blah will be addressed first. Nish in the house tonight. Hello, Nish. Jana.
Hi, Nish.
Hey.
Hi, Steve.
Nice to see you here. Yeah. Hi, Steve. Laura.
Hi, Laura.
In the house. I love that my girl comes to the chat room. Canadian goose shit all over the place in the chat room. Sister Nino's in the house. Let's see. All kinds of folks in the house tonight. Well,
any questions for us in all caps?
We appreciate you guys spending every Wednesday evening with us. We love it. All right, let's see. We've been going for an hour and 20. So if you do have questions, comments, thoughts, concerns, complete nonsense to share, now in all caps is the time to do it.
Can anyone okay, so there's talk in the chat about the second constitution. Can anyone summarize what the fundamental difference is between the two? Like, were certain amendments or articles lost or dropped from the second one? Were things added to the second one?
Okay, so this is me completely speaking out of my ass because just based on it's been so long since I looked at it that I don't have the details right. But I think most of the change was linguistic. It was a move from lawful language to legal language, like into legalese.
Okay.
So if I recall from most of my studies about that was the biggest shift. And that's why it's so easy for people to not recognize it or to be confused by it, because ideally it sounds like they're talking about the same thing.
Right.
Right. If someone has a better explanation than that, then.
I interviewed Brandon Joe Williams yesterday on all the like common law, sovereign state, national stuff. And it seems like it's the same thing in terms of these opaque words that don't mean what we think they mean. And it sounds like it's that kind of rigmarole.
It's like legalese, and there's a bunch of different sort of varieties and theories on this kind of thing. But it's like one of these, for example, when you generally in conversation with me use the word understand, you are trying to convey to me that you that the idea that I'm trying to share with you, that you are receiving the information and you know what I'm talking about. You're not declaring that you stand under me and
Correct.
that I'm your overlord, right?
Correct.
So there's all of these different understandings, right? Okay, so there are some all caps comments and questions. Hi Heart Wellness. Any hot takes on Dave Smith? Good faith or bad faith actor? Yeah, I just was noticing when we were looking at something earlier that it looks like he's going to be on Tucker Carlson tonight, right? For a long sit down interview. I know they're friends. I don't think I think he is genuine, right? Right. I don't get a bunch of bullshit coming from him, but I think part of the reason he has moved to the front of the line in his sort of movement rather than other people is because he's kind of acceptable on some levels to certain portions of the establishment, even if it's the more outer wings of the establishment. I think he's on some level a threat to like serious corruption, but he's not really a threat to economic power based on the brand of libertarianism that he believes in, right? Like that would be a place that a lot of the blob would be willing to settle to ensure that we don't achieve actual freedom, right? Kind of thing. So I don't think he's acting in bad faith. I just think that like his sort of viewpoint is like a more, I don't want to say sanitized, but like it's a defanged version of free. I don't, some people hate the word freedom, some hate the word liberty, whatever it is you think you want. His is a defanged version of that, right? So that's my thoughts. What are your thoughts?
I'm not super familiar with him, but the few things that I've seen, like it's not activating any of my spidey senses. But if he is going to be on with Tucker, similarly, when anyone goes on with Joe, I'm on alert.
Yep.
For like, what's the play? What's the game?
Right. And in his particular case, it's like, it's kind of like, well, if we can get those freedom lovers to kind of sign up to his course instead of like the actual freedom, you know what I mean? Then like, that's a good play to have. Right. So let's get all of our actors on the stage, right? So that, well, whichever one we end up having to go with is already liked by the people or whatever it is. Right. So, okay. So curious about the theory that this is from Boxer MK. Curious about the theory that Kennedy will be the Dem nominee. I think you're saying why do I think that? I don't think he'll be the Democratic nominee. I think there's a reasonable possibility he will be the establishment candidate, right? That he's the person that the establishment actually wants to sort of push forward based on his ability to bring acceptance of certain things that would otherwise not be accepted, and that all of this sort of it's like it's a show that they're really anti-Kennedy, right? It's all just pomp and circumstance and dog and pony show, that they're like creating this idea that the establishment doesn't like him when really they would be just fine with him.
I have a question for you. Because High Heart Wellness just wrote, P.S. Canadian Goose shit, Luna, who cut my hair today, says these are French girl bangs, not London. I have French girl bangs, but thank you. High Heart Wellness says he was also just confirmed to debate Chris Cuomo this month with Patrick Bet-David. Why is Patrick Bet-David so famous? Like, how did he land on the scene this way? Isn't he like an insurance guy from Granada Hills?
I didn't know he was from Granada Hills. I think he's from Glendale. I think he's from Glendale, but maybe he's from Granada Hills. So I don't know either, right? Just suddenly it was coming up in my feed and he already had like a lot of followers at that point. It wasn't like, my guess would be that he's part of that blob that moved to Florida that is all funded by, you know, certain moneyed interests. And he probably is part of the moneyed interest blob, right? And that, you know, they like him because he's the sort of like, you know, immigrant success story, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and blah, blah, blah kind of, you know, nonsense. But, and he's a good sort of debater and arguer if you like that kind of thing. And, you know, I don't know. It doesn't really do it for me. It's not, he's like, for me, he's like not the worst, but he's not like, it's not interesting to me most of the time. And also he sort of has a good relationship with almost everybody, so he can get two people together that otherwise would never be on the same debate stage or whatever it is, and he seems to be able to maintain that sort of cordial relationship with everyone. So I mean,
I think he's really well spoken, and I actually like his approach. I just noticed I never saw him like making his way to the top. All of a sudden he just appeared and was super famous and had a ton of followers and obviously a ton of money behind the show. I know he's quite rich himself, but
my guess is that he got to those. We should go back and see what his early channel was, like videos 1, 2, and 3. My guess would be he started with like financial advice or sales advice or entrepreneurial advice. And then at some point it made the shift to political and social punditry when he already had, because there's a lot of people who will go get financial or business advice from someone who they don't necessarily agree with politically. And then you have this big base of people, and then you can start talking and you know, okay, these people came here for my financial advice. I need to present a variety of opinions here, which also then makes for something kind of interesting with people talking. But I would be surprised. To me, either he had to be given his audience or the audience had to be built on something else that then he just transitioned into a more news and current event topic related kind of thing. I've seen other people do that, right? Okay. Let's see. Let me see if there was any other. Have y'all seen the virtual portal between London and New York City? Well, I did see, I think you sent me an article about the one between New York City and Dublin being shut down or something. That's the only, I remember hearing about this art project. Maybe it was from Jeff, like a few months back, that they were putting all these like little portals or Stargate thingies in downtowns. Right?
Are they calling them Stargates? Are like, do we literally kind of like molecularly come apart and then come back together? Or are they,
let me see.
Like, are they acknowledging some sort of like extra dimensional technology?
Let me see if I can, I watched the video that Jana sent me earlier. So let me see if I can easily get it in my history, because it probably is in today's history. And then I'll show you what we're talking about. If I can, oh, nope, it doesn't seem to have popped up in my, yeah, it's not here. It's not here. I don't know that they let you put video links in the chat room. If Jana, if you want to put it, Jana's a moderator, so you could probably put it in the chat. If you can find it, put it in the chat box and I'll play it, Jana. Okay, let's see. There was some more. Tunnel Mental, hi Nigel, says the blob that moved to Florida, is that a B movie from the 60s? Yes, that probably probably a C movie. Probably C. B is too kind. Portals to propaganda, absolutely. All right, guys.
Wait, while we have Nish's attention, I'm hoping that if you've covered the Met Gala, let me know so that I can follow it. And I'm also wondering if Nish is covering the self-referential nature of all quote unquote entertainment these days. Because whenever I see it, Nish, I just think of you. And I'm like, I hope you guys are talking about this on Prima Donnas.
So what is the most recent example you saw of the self-referential nature?
Okay, I saw this. So first of all, I watched this terrible movie. It was like an Ocean's 8 with Sandra Bullock and all these chicks. And it was all about like the Met Gala and their own famous people. But then I saw this new terrible movie with Anne Hathaway, and she's like dating some like boy band guy. And what was weird in it was like they referenced Campbell Hall by name multiple times. They kept saying Silver Lake. Well, I was at a party in Echo Park. There's like, and then at these award shows that I'll see clips of in Instagram, they're all talking about themselves. They're all, you know, the inside jokes. The host is like throwing out barbs to the celebrities in the audience. It's all very like insular. Okay, awesome. Nish says she and Amy have something juicy in the works. Not the Mecco good. It's not worthy of your attention. It was such a piece of shit.
Awesome. All right. Do we have anything else? Anyone going once? Oh, let's get Jonna. Are you doing the? It's okay if you don't. Oh, she's looking for the link.
Thank
All
you.
right. So let's see if we can fill another minute or two so she can find the link so I can show you what she's.
I'm gonna drop my Music and Sky discount registration link into the chat.
Speaking of Music and Sky, Dani had an awesome interview with Mike Winter that I was enjoying listening to on the airplane. Well, I listened a little bit on the airplane, but then like when I was in the Uber on the way from the airport to my hotel, I was listening. So guys, go check that out.
The coolest thing about interviewing Mike Winter was realizing how much we had in common.
Well, I knew he was from Southern California.
Okay.
Right? Because the most of the interactions I've had with him have been around like the dance music conversation and the rave scene kind of thing. But yeah, like I didn't. There's more listening to. Like I might like to explore some of that as well because your interests and my interests sort of differ. But it's interesting how he sort of has claws in some of those, but then it was like you guys were talking about restaurants that were like in Santa Barbara, which I've never lived in Santa Barbara, that were favorite. Oh, look at that were favorite restaurants of mine and my sister and my mom's when we would go up to Santa Barbara for lunch and all of that kind of stuff, right? So yeah,
I love
the piranha, right? There we go.
Working there, I had to taste everything on the menu. And oftentimes, because the thing with sushi is, you know, the presentation. So sometimes I'd like be delivering something and like pretend to accidentally trip to mess up the presentation so that we had to eat it.
Well, we've all done this before. We've ordered the wrong cocktail, right? We've done
right.
You wouldn't.
I wouldn't want that to go to waste.
Oopsie. All right. John is saying they won't let her post the link here. So I'll like maybe I'll come with the link next time. All right. I think that does it for us. Anything else before we go? Thanks for hanging out, guys. We love seeing you on Wednesday nights. It's very it feels nice that so many of you come every time. So many colleagues here, friends, all of that kind of stuff. So thank you for that. And
thank you for your generous super chats. If you miss the chance to super chat us, you can always just send a donation. Also, wordspodcast.locals.com.
Promo code welcome to words, all one word in capital. This is the first time I haven't slipped it in somehow, right? Damn, usually I get it in like subliminally in crafty ways. Off my game tonight. All right, guys, thank you so much. We will see you next week. We're out.